Okay, this is a proper book review, and I've got my marinated cheese going on here. I'm going to try not to mix into my book, but this is By Silence Betrayed by John Crewdson, Sexual Abuse of Children in America. And this was published in 1988. And that date is important because of this was written right on the heels of the McMartin preschool case. And this is one of those books that if you're interested in a lot of the topics I've covered on this channel, especially ritual abuse related topics, things like that, I highly recommend this book. Great broad coverage of abuse topics, but more specifically to this audience, there's some really good sections on organized abuse as it relates to like daycare cases and things like that. But what I wanted to bring up, what I want to focus on tonight, is the McMartin preschool case in here. There's some really good information on this, and a case out of Jordan, Minnesota, I believe. But before I get too far into that, let me just say that the good news on this particular book, a lot of this chapter, this predates Tim Tate's Children for the Devil, and I'll link to that at the end of this. But this predates his book by at least a couple of years, if not more. And I did find it a little odd. His section on McMartin is really, really similar to Tim Tate's. It's almost like Tim Tate read this and kind of distilled it down for the McMartin section for his book on Children for the Devil. Not accusing anyone of plagiarism or anything like that, but eerily similar though. Not that there's a problem with that, but anyway, By Silence Betrayed, highly recommend it. I've got a lot of stuff dog-eared and outlined in here that I wanted to bring up because this is a gold mine of material for those of you researching, again, like the McMartin preschool case and some of that kind of stuff. Lots of stuff to dig up on lots of things to go on that. One of the first things that jumped out at me was, let's see. There's a case mentioned in here from, I believe it's from Minnesota, about the Georgian Hills Early Childhood Center. It was a church-run preschool in the heart of a conservative, solidly Baptist neighborhood, was charged with abusing 19 children at the center, all of them under the age of 5. And a lot of these are convictions. These are, so for the people that say the ritual abuse, there were never any convictions. He catalogs a lot of convictions in this, so get it for that if nothing else. And then he goes on to explain how this, he says, as was the case in most states, allegations of child sexual abuse in nurseries and preschools were not new to Tennessee. In the months before the Georgian Hills case surfaced, the state had closed a half a dozen other daycare centers because of suspected child abuse. So again, not exactly hysteria when the state has to step in and close places down. Now, this is one of the things that's going to be of interest to this audience, if you're familiar with like the West Memphis 3 case and some of that, is he mentions that another case in Memphis, Tennessee, he talks about some of the kids, and I remember you're dealing with, in most of these cases, these are toddlers that are telling police about this stuff. And the more verbal of the children are explaining things that toddlers could not possibly know. But one of the interesting things here is, in this Memphis case, that some of the kids talked about being taken to the Memphis airport, put aboard a small plane, and flown across the Mississippi River to a town in Arkansas, which would be, of course, like West Memphis or that area. I found that very interesting. That they were taken across into that part of that region of Arkansas where the West Memphis 3 killings occurred. So find that interesting. Also, he mentions a case in Bakersfield where these two married couples were, I believe they were both convicted, but this is the curious part, that the parents of one of the couples involved, the parents of one of the women, Deborah McEwen's parents, charged in the same case with 33 counts of abuse of their grandchildren, and the Niffen's children jumped bail and disappeared. So little things like that, they're like, wow, okay. And also describes some, and this is one that kind of hit home with me, about another case in Mendocino County, California, where a preschool run by fundamentalist Christians told police that they had been tied to crosses and made to chant "Baby Jesus is dead" while being abused. And then one of the moms goes on to explain how her daughter would act out some of this stuff in her sleep and having these crazy nightmares. And she says the nightmares, the mother said, were like pornographic movies. And one of the children that I worked with years ago in a facility that handled, and this was one of the ritual abuse cases that I heard about, would do that too, would act out in his sleep, and you would hear him recount some of this stuff at night. And that was very unsettling. And for me as a young man, I remember hearing some of that stuff at night, working overnight shifts and being like, that's no bueno. So anyway, lots of stuff in addition to the McMartin case. In addition to the McMartin case, but here's some of the things that I found of interest in the McMartin section. He has a whole chapter just on the McMartin preschool case. And one of the things that's mentioned is that the kids mentioned this Episcopal church that was close to, in all this, the McMartin case. If you're unfamiliar, like I said, I'll link to a couple other books at the end of this, the Tim Tate book, as well as the Ross Cheat book at the end of this. So be sure to check those out. But in a nutshell, that was one of the key ritual abuse daycare cases that is now held up as an example of mass hysteria. But when you go back and examine the original court documents and a lot of the original writing articles before and during the trial, you find there's a very different story. It wasn't until the False Memory Syndrome Foundation popped up and kind of massaged all the data that that really became more the official narrative that this was all, mass hysteria. But some of the kids involved ID'd an Episcopal church nearby, and even gave very specific details about this church that they would not have known had they not been inside this church. And it says, clandestine satanic ceremonies at an Episcopal church, especially a church that was one of the few liberal strongholds in a rather conservative community, surely not possible, the police thought. They had second thoughts when the state closed a daycare center operated by the church after half a dozen children were found by doctors to have been sexually abused. And then he lists several others in that area. Okay, this all took place in Manhattan Beach, California. I think it's just south of Los Angeles. He also mentions Manhattan Ranch School was closed by the state after 3 McMartin children said they had been taken there and abused by strangers. But there's several other daycare centers. They're all mentioned in here. Too many for me to go too far into that. But lots of very interesting details on that. So again, if you're into that, checking out these cases, I highly recommend that. It's a gold mine of stuff. I've been going back and forth searching some of the stuff I found in here. But this is an interesting quote by Key McFarlane. I think I'm saying her name right. She was the child psychologist that was brought in by the police, by the Manhattan Beach Police Department, to interview the children. And she made this comment about this case. And I think she did this as part of a public statement. But she said, the preschool in such a case serves as a ruse for a larger, unthinkable network of crimes against children. If such an operation involves child pornography or the selling of children, as is frequently alleged, it may have greater financial, legal, and community resources at its disposal than those attempting to expose it. And boy, that says everything about the McMartin case right there. But lots of good information. I'm going to wrap up with just a couple of other points about this because, again, there's so much gold in here. I don't want to just sit and read the book all night. But some of you that have researched some of these topics, I'm curious if any of you have heard about teddy bear symbolism. That's allegedly one of the teddy bear symbolism is another one of those pedophile network things, allegedly. And I've only read up a little bit on that. I've mainly heard about that more than anything else. But I found this information interesting. Again, he doesn't draw this parallel, but I am. And he says that Virginia McMartin, who at her arraignment insisted on wearing the fuzzy teddy bear pin that had become her trademark. And that jumped out at me, having heard that symbolism is tied to a lot of those rings, as it were. Also, they talk about a doctor who the kids had identified this doctor and pointed out his house. Before he could be brought in for questioning or trial or anything, he was immediately admitted to some kind of center for alcohol abuse. So that kind of took him out of commission for he was kind of left alone as a result of that. The other final thing that I'll cover here is they're talking about the words kids used for genitalia and things like that, which I know probably none of y'all want to hear, but trust me, this is relevant. One of the defense lawyer tried to really jump on him about the kids using this more adult terminology, saying the kids didn't know what it meant. And they're saying, yeah, you're right. They don't know what it means. They know these terms because we had to teach them these terms so they could testify and it would make sense. And then they say this about the kid's testimony and all that. They said, it's just that she's talking about a female child witness and how their terminology they're using. And she says, it's just that she's at an age where she's horribly embarrassed by all of this. She's just about died during the medical exam. I expected her to fold up on the stand. Those words didn't come from here because we never used adult terminology with the kids. If they called it a Google, we called it a Google. I found that very interesting. Don't know if that means anything or not, but anyway, I'm going to stop there. But just this is a great resource for those of you digging into the McMartin preschool case or a lot of bigger abuse topics. Very well researched, not hysteria, anything like that. It really spans the whole abuse spectrum of child abuse, and how basically his point in this book is that this has to be addressed. We're going to have to talk about it in order to fix it, and you can't fix it by everybody playing like it's not a problem and it doesn't exist. So anyway, lots of really good sobering information in this about child abuse topics, and especially, like I said, for this audience, the organized abuse aspect is, I think, really worth noting here. So I'm going to stop there. My cats, I think, are about to start a cat fight up under the table here. So if you hear growling, that's not me. But anyway, this is By Silence Betrayed: Sexual Abuse of Children in America by John Crewdson from 1988.